The silent warning, hook, and suspense. The stars glittered peacefully in the vastness of space, and for many, it was just another calm day in the galactic region. Ships drifted along their designated routes, cargo ships hauling goods, passenger liners taking travelers from one star system to another, and military patrols keeping a watchful eye on everything. In the midst of all this, the space station Horizon floated quietly near the edge of the known galaxy, a safe outpost for anyone traveling through the area. But that peace was about to shatter. It started small. At first, no one noticed. The readings on the station's long-range sensors were faint, barely noticeable to the crew. Just a few odd energy spikes that seemed to come from nowhere. The station's chief scientist, Dr. Lydia Mendez, was the first to spot it. She was staring at the screens in the quiet of her lab, her eyes narrowing as the strange patterns appeared again. "That's odd," she muttered to herself. Her fingers quickly tapped away at the controls. A few moments later, she frowned deeply. The readings weren't random. They were deliberate. Someone was sending out a signal. It was like a beacon, a call into the void. But from where? And who was behind it? As Dr. Mendez ran more diagnostics, she couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. The signal wasn't coming from any known location. It wasn't just a random transmission from deep space. It was directed. Whoever or whatever was sending it, they wanted to be found. Or perhaps they wanted to find something. "Captain, you need to see this," she said, her voice now urgent as she patched through to the command center. Within minutes, Captain Elias Hargrove, a seasoned officer with a sharp mind and quick reflexes, arrived at the science lab. He took one look at the data streaming across the screen and immediately understood that something was off. "Is this a distress signal?" he asked, his voice calm but with a hint of concern. "No, it's not," Dr. Mendez replied, shaking her head. "It's too precise, too organized. It's not random space debris or a malfunction. This is intentional. But who would be out here, so far from the center of the galaxy?" Captain Hargrove's brow furrowed as he studied the data. He knew the area well. This was the edge of explored space, where little was known beyond the faint stars and scattered planets. Anything that ventured into this space was either lost or intentionally here. But to send a signal, that meant someone or something was coming, and that sent a chill down his spine. "Get me a full fleet scan. I want to know everything about this signal, where it's coming from, how strong it is, and if there's any chance it could be a threat," Hargrove ordered. Minutes ticked by intense silence as the crew worked quickly to gather information. The station's systems hummed with activity as data poured in from all angles. There was nothing unusual, except for the signal. It didn't match anything they had on file. No known alien species, no human factions. It wasn't even one of the galactic empires they kept track of. The possibilities were endless, and none of them were comforting. Then, a new alarm blared. A much more distinct signal. This time, it wasn't just a transmission. It was a massive, unmistakable energy pulse. The kind of power that could only come from a warship's engines. "Captain, it's moving. Fast," said Lieutenant Chloe Harris, the communications officer, her voice shaking slightly as she scanned the data. "It's headed straight toward us." The crew stood frozen for a moment, the weight of those words settling heavily on everyone. There were no reports of large ships in this area, and no one had expected any sort of military activity so far from the heart of the galaxy. "How fast are we talking?" Captain Hargrove asked, his voice cold and focused. "It's traveling at almost twice the speed of any known warship, Captain, and it's headed straight for Horizon," Lieutenant Harris replied. Captain Hargrove felt a chill run through him. "Lock down all external systems. Prepare for possible combat. Everyone, to your stations." The tension in the command center was palpable as the crew sprang into action. No one spoke, but everyone knew the gravity of the situation. If a ship like that was headed toward them, they had to be ready. The station was vulnerable. small, lightly armed, and unprepared for an attack from something unknown. As the warship drew closer, Captain Hargrove made a critical decision. He would send a distress signal to the nearest Galactic fleet, but the message was simple: unidentified warship approaching. Prepare for possible combat. The silence in the station was deafening as they waited, and with every passing minute, the mystery grew. Who could be behind this? What was their purpose? And why had they waited so long to reveal themselves? Out there, somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, a human-made warship was approaching, and it was ready for battle. The crew of Horizon could only brace themselves for what was to come, unsure if they would survive the first encounter with this unknown force. The calmness of space was gone, replaced with a palpable sense of impending danger. Would they find out who was behind the ship? Or would the warship destroy them all before they had a chance to discover its secrets? The discovery. The crew of the Horizon waited in tense silence, their minds racing as the massive warship approached, its ominous energy readings growing stronger by the minute. Captain Hargrove stood at the command center, his eyes glued to the main viewport as the unknown vessel slowly came into view. Its design was like nothing they had ever seen before, sleek, angular, and foreboding, almost as if it had been crafted to strike fear into anyone who laid eyes on it. "It's human," Lieutenant Harris asked in disbelief, her voice shaky as she double-checked the readings. The ship's markings, they're familiar. The crew exchanged confused glances. They had all seen the records of human ships, but this one was different. There was no mistaking it. This ship had the technology of an advanced civilization, far beyond what humanity had ever produced. And yet there it was, unmistakably human-made. Captain Hargrove didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. On one hand, this warship was a product of human ingenuity. On the other, the sheer scale and power of it seemed far beyond what any known human faction could muster. What was the purpose of this ship? And where had it been hiding all this time? The ship's approach was methodical. It didn't seem to be in a hurry, but it was inevitable. Soon, it would be close enough to make contact with the station. Hargrove ordered the station's defensive systems to be primed, though he knew that even their best weaponry wouldn't stand much of a chance against this unknown warship. "Signal it again," Hargrove commanded. "This time, let's be more direct. Request identification." Lieutenant Harris complied, but the response was not what they expected. Instead of a simple reply, a brief message crackled through the comm system. "We are human. We are ready." The cryptic message sent a ripple of confusion through the crew. Ready for what? The unknown warship's intentions were still unclear. Were they here to defend humanity, or were they something more sinister? Dr. Mendez had been monitoring the ship's energy signature from the science lab, and now she joined the rest of the crew in the command center. She glanced at the data screen, her face pale. This is impossible," she murmured. "Talk to us, Dr. Mendez," Captain Hargrove said, his voice tight with concern. "What's going on?" She pointed to the screen, where the data had shifted. The power signature. It's not just from the warship itself. It's coming from somewhere within. I think it's a part of a larger system." "A system," Hargrove repeated, raising an eyebrow. "What kind of system?" Dr. Mendez hesitated before answering. "It's like a massive, self-sustaining engine, unlike anything we've ever seen. It could power a fleet of ships, and yet it's all contained within this one vessel. The scale of it is unfathomable. I don't understand how humans could have built something like this." The crew was stunned into silence. This wasn't just some military ship. It was a mobile fortress, a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. Could it be a prototype? Lieutenant Harris suggested, trying to make sense of the situation. Maybe it was part of a forgotten human project, something that was never meant to be found. "It's possible," Captain Hargrove said, though his voice was filled with doubt. "But if it's human, why hasn't anyone heard of it? And why does it seem so ancient?" There was no answer. The questions piled up, but the only thing that mattered now was the approaching warship. They had no choice but to prepare for the worst. As the warship drew closer, Dr. Mendez's screens began to flash red. "Captain, it's locking onto us. We're its target." Everyone in the command center froze. The warship had finally made its move, and now it seemed clear. It was no longer just observing the station. It was preparing for something. Was it about to fire on them? Or was this merely the beginning of a larger confrontation? Captain Hargrove clenched his fists. "Get the defense systems online. All stations. Prepare for impact." The tension was unbearable as the crew scrambled to prepare for whatever came next. They had no idea what kind of weaponry this warship had at its disposal, but they had to be ready for anything. Could they defend themselves? Could they survive against a force so powerful, so unknown? The warship continued its advance, and with each passing second, the mystery deepened. Why had it remained hidden for so long? Why had it suddenly revealed itself now, at the very edge of known space? And most importantly, who had sent it? And what did they want? As the ship loomed ever closer, the Horizon's crew could only brace themselves for what was to come. The first true encounter with this mysterious human-made warship was about to begin. But the questions remained. Was it a friend, or an unstoppable force bent on destruction? Only time would tell. The unexpected message. The Horizon sat in the dark void of space, a tiny speck compared to the massive warship slowly closing in. The air in the command center was thick with tension as Captain Hargrove and his crew waited, unsure of what would happen next. Every crew member on board could feel it. This wasn't just an encounter with another ship. This was something far more dangerous, and they could sense it in their bones. Just as the crew braced for potential impact, the unexpected happened. The warship stopped. Not suddenly, but with a slow, deliberate ease, as if it were testing the waters before making its next move. The Horizon's sensors could barely keep up with the warship's shifting position as it hovered nearby. It wasn't preparing for battle yet, but something was happening, something strange. Then, a pulse of light erupted from the warship, and the communication system on the Horizon crackled to life. The crew exchanged nervous glances as the distorted voice echoed across the room. "This is the Empyrean, identifying ourselves." The voice was cold, distant, and yet unmistakably human. "We are human. We are ready." For a moment, no one spoke. The room fell completely still as the weight of the message hung in the air. The voice on the other end didn't sound threatening, yet there was an eerie certainty to it, as if the speaker knew exactly who they were, but there was no explanation. No clarity on what the message meant. Captain Hargrove quickly stepped forward, his fingers steady as he activated the comms to respond. "This is Captain Elias Hargrove of the Horizon. We are receiving your transmission. Who are you? Why are you here?" His voice was firm, but underneath the professionalism, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. He needed answers, and quickly. There was a long pause before the voice responded again, this time clearer, almost deliberate in its tone. "We are the last remnants of the human race," the voice said, each word laced with an undeniable gravity. "We are humanity's final defense. We have been waiting, hidden in the void, for the day when we would be needed." The crew exchanged confused and alarmed looks. "The last remnants." Dr. Mendez repeated under her breath, her voice barely a whisper. "What are they talking about? What happened to humanity?" The voice continued, as though the crew's confusion didn't matter. It was determined, almost mechanical in its delivery. "We were built to survive, to defend, to protect the very core of humanity from the threats beyond the stars. And we are ready to engage." Captain Hargrove's mind raced. Defense. Protect. Humanity's final defense. Was this some kind of military faction, a lost group that had been hiding away, waiting for a time when the galaxy would need them again? Or was this something darker, something beyond mere defense? I still don't understand, Hargrove said, his tone firm but tinged with disbelief. You say you are human, but we've never heard of anything like you. Where have you been? Why now? What do you want? The voice was patient, but there was a finality in its words. We are not part of your history. Our mission was never meant to be known. We were constructed in secret, long before your time. But now, we have returned. The time has come to fulfill our purpose. The communication cut out abruptly, leaving the Horizon's crew in stunned silence. The room was filled with the hum of the ship's systems, but for a moment, it felt as if the entire universe had gone still. No one spoke, no one moved. The message had been delivered, but it raised even more questions than answers. Captain Hargrove rubbed his temples, his thoughts a blur. If this was true, if this ship, the Empyrean, really was the last defense of humanity, then it could be the most important discovery in the history of the galaxy. But it could also be a massive threat. They didn't know what this ship's mission really was, and judging by the way it had reacted to their presence, it didn't seem like the crew of the Horizon was about to get any easy answers. We need to get in touch with the Galactic Council, Captain Hargrove said, his voice calm but determined. This is bigger than us. We can't handle this alone. Dr. Mendez nodded. I agree, Captain. This ship is beyond anything we've ever encountered. But we have to be careful. If they are truly humanity's last defense, we don't know what they'll do next. The silence stretched on. In the distance, the warship hummed ominously in space, waiting, watching, ready for whatever came next. And the crew of the Horizon could only wait, too, unsure of what kind of human-made force they were dealing with, and uncertain whether this strange warship would become humanity's salvation or its downfall. Preparing for war. The atmosphere on the Horizon was tense, every member of the crew aware that they were standing at the brink of something enormous. The unknown warship, the Empyrean, loomed in the distance, its silent presence hanging over them like a dark cloud. After the cryptic message and the eerie calm it had sent through the airwaves, Captain Hargrove knew they couldn't wait much longer to prepare. Whether this ship was friend or foe, they had to be ready. Get the crew into their stations, Captain Hargrove commanded, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship. This might be a waiting game, but it could also turn into something more dangerous. I want everyone prepared for anything. The crew moved quickly, each member going to their designated post. Lieutenant Harris tapped furiously at her console, monitoring communications, while Dr. Mendez returned to the science lab, working to decipher the strange energy signatures the Empyrean was emitting. The intensity of the unknown warship's power was unlike anything they had seen. It was clear this wasn't just a simple military ship. It had been designed for something much more, perhaps something far more dangerous. Captain Hargrove walked the corridors of the Horizon, his mind racing with possibilities. What was the Empyrean's purpose? And why had it chosen now, after all these years of waiting, to reveal itself? Was it meant to be a defense, as it had claimed? Or was it part of something more sinister? He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to this story than the cold, mechanical message they had received. Captain, come see this. Dr. Mendez's voice came through the comm system, snapping him out of his thoughts. He made his way to the science lab, where Dr. Mendez was hunched over her screen, her eyes wide in disbelief. What is it? Hargrove asked, stepping closer. Look at these readings, she said, gesturing to the screen. The ship's energy signature. It's not just a power source. It's been growing, evolving. I've been tracking the ship's movements, and it's not just following a path. It's adjusting, adapting, as if it's waiting for something. Captain Hargrove frowned. Waiting for what? Dr. Mendez hesitated, then looked up at him, her expression serious. I think it's waiting for orders. It's like it has a built-in intelligence, an autonomous system that reacts to its surroundings. It's almost as if it's been programmed to wait until the right moment to strike. The longer it sits there, the more it seems to analyze the Horizon, our ship, our capabilities. Hargrove's stomach churned. It was a sobering realization. This wasn't just a ship. This was a weapon. It was a weapon that had been waiting for its target, analyzing it, learning from it. And they were that target. "We need to act fast," Hargrove said, more to himself than to anyone else. "If it's waiting for us to make the first move, we have to be ready." He turned to Lieutenant Harris, who had been busy monitoring the communications channels. "Anything new from the Empyrean?" he asked. Harris shook her head. "No, Captain. It hasn't sent any more messages. But the signal is getting stronger. It's like it's focusing all its attention on us." "Prepare the defenses," Hargrove ordered. "All weapons systems online. Activate shields. If this ship is looking for a fight, I don't want us unprepared." The crew worked quickly, their movements synchronized in a way that only comes from years of experience. They checked every system, double-checked every weapon, and ensured the ship's shield generators were operating at full capacity. It was a race against time. As Hargrove stood on the bridge, watching the warship through the viewport, the tension in his chest tightened. The unknown ship wasn't just a threat. It was a mystery, one that they could not afford to ignore. Every instinct in him told him to wait, to hold back, but the threat of a surprise attack from such a powerful force was too real. They needed answers, but they couldn't afford to be caught off guard. Dr. Mendez's voice came over the comms again. "Captain, I've been scanning the warship's hull. I found something strange. There's a series of markings. They're faded, but they appear to be human-made. They might be old military codes, perhaps from the early days of the Galactic Empire." Captain Hargrove's heart skipped a beat. If these were ancient human military codes, it meant the warship wasn't just a secret project. It was part of a lost era of human history. But how had it survived all these years? And why had it remained hidden for so long? "Keep me posted on your findings, Dr. Mendez," Hargrove said, his voice steady despite the growing uncertainty. "We need every piece of information we can get." Minutes felt like hours as the crew braced for whatever would come next. The warship's slow advance toward the horizon was unnerving, each second that passed stretching the tension further and further. Was it going to attack, or was it waiting for them to make the first move? There was no way to know, and that uncertainty gnawed at the crew's nerves. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Captain Hargrove made the call. "Open a direct line to the Empyrean. We need answers now." The communication system buzzed to life, and the crew held their breath as the screen flickered. The response was immediate, the cold voice of the warship's operator crackling through the comms. "We are ready," it said again, with a finality that sent a chill down Hargrove's spine. "We are ready to engage." The crew of the Horizon exchanged one last glance before the inevitable confrontation. They were as ready as they could be, but whether it would be enough, no one could say. The warship was here, and the battle for humanity's future had just begun. The clash. The time for talking had passed. The unknown warship, the Empyrean, had given its final message, and now, it was clear, it was preparing for battle. The tension that had been building for hours had reached its breaking point. The crew of the Horizon was ready to face whatever came next, though no one could be sure what that would be. The Empyrean hovered ominously in space, silent, its massive form dwarfing the Horizon in comparison. Despite the Horizon's best efforts to prepare, there was no escaping the overwhelming sense of uncertainty. Every crew member could feel it. This wasn't just an ordinary skirmish. It was something far more dangerous. "We've got incoming," Lieutenant Harris shouted, her voice filled with urgency. The sensors went wild as the Empyrean unleashed its first move. A series of brilliant energy beams shot from the warship's cannons, their intensity enough to light up the dark expanse of space. The Horizon's shields flared as they absorbed the blasts, but it was clear that the station's defensive systems were already being pushed to their limits. "Shields holding at 70%. One of the officers called out from the control console. Captain Hargrove gripped the arm of his chair. "Return fire. Now." he barked. The crew scrambled to engage the Horizon's weapon systems. The small outpost had some firepower, but it was no match for the size and sheer destructive force of the Empyrean. Still, they had to try. The Horizon's cannons fired in retaliation, beams of energy shooting toward the oncoming warship. However, it was like throwing pebbles at a mountain. The Empyrean absorbed the shots without flinching, its shields flickering but never truly weakening. "This isn't working," Lieutenant Harris said, watching the energy readings. "They're too strong. We need a different strategy, Captain." "Keep firing," Hargrove ordered, though his mind was racing. There had to be something they could do. The Empyrean's firepower was devastating, and its massive size made it nearly impossible to hit with their weapons. Dr. Mendez's voice crackled through the comms. "Captain, I've been analyzing the warship's energy. It's not just a matter of firepower. There's something unnatural about it. It's as if the ship is absorbing our attacks." Captain Hargrove's mind raced. "Absorbing? What do you mean?" "I think the Empyrean has some sort of energy conversion system. It's taking our blasts and converting them into power. We need to disrupt it somehow. If we don't, they'll just keep getting stronger." "Great," Hargrove muttered. "Any ideas on how we can disrupt it?" "I'm working on it," Dr. Mendez replied quickly. "But it'll take time. You need to buy me a few minutes." Hargrove's heart raced as he glanced at the energy readings from the Empyrean. The warship's attacks were relentless. The Horizon's shields were already down to 40%, and the crew knew that once they hit zero, they would be sitting ducks. "Lieutenant Harris, how are we doing on the escape routes?" Hargrove asked. Harris glanced at the monitor and shook her head. "We're boxed in. There's no way out, Captain. If we try to flee, we'll be vulnerable." Hargrove nodded grimly. It was clear now that they couldn't escape. Their only option was to fight back, even if the odds were stacked against them. "Keep the fire coming. All crew, brace for impact." The Empyrean fired again, this time unleashing a massive energy wave that slammed into the Horizon. The ship rocked violently, and alarms blared across the bridge. "Shields at 30%, someone shouted. "Status report on the weapon systems," Hargrove demanded, gripping the edge of his console. "Weaponry still functional, but the energy output is inconsistent," came the response. "We don't have enough firepower to take it down." Captain Hargrove clenched his jaw. They needed an edge, something they could use to get through the Empyrean's nearly impenetrable defenses. But what? "Captain," Dr. Mendez's voice broke through the chaos. "I think I've found something. The Empyrean has a weak spot, a gap in its energy conversion system. It's near the core, but it's shielded by a dense layer of armor. If we can hit it with a concentrated blast, it should disrupt the conversion and weaken their shields." Hargrove's heart skipped a beat. This was their chance, but they had to act fast. The Empyrean was still relentlessly firing on them, and they were running out of time. "Lieutenant Harris, lock onto that weak spot," Hargrove ordered. "All energy into that one shot. This is our only shot." The crew worked quickly, adjusting the targeting systems as they lined up the shot. The Horizon fired everything it had left, the concentrated beam of energy blasting toward the Empyrean. For a moment, time seemed to slow as the beam cut through space, heading straight for the warship's core. The Empyrean's shields flared one last time, but they couldn't hold up. The blast hit its mark. The entire warship shook violently as the energy conversion system faltered. Sparks flew from the Empyrean's hull, and its energy shields began to flicker, weakening. But just as the crew of the Horizon began to breathe a sigh of relief, the warship's engines roared back to life, and its weapons systems powered up once more. "Brace for impact," Captain Hargrove shouted as the Empyrean fired another devastating wave of energy. The battle was far from over. Truth revealed. The Horizon rocked once again under the crushing force of the Empyrean's blast. Sparks flew from the command console, and the station's lights flickered as systems began to fail. The crew scrambled to keep things under control, but it was clear they were in a losing battle. Their weapons had little effect, and their shields were almost completely depleted. The Empyrean was an unstoppable force, and they were merely delaying the inevitable. Shields at 10%. We can't take much more of this. Lieutenant Harris shouted, her voice tense with panic. Captain Hargrove's knuckles were white as he gripped the console, his eyes scanning the readouts. "We're not giving up yet," he said firmly. "Keep firing." "Dr. Mendez, any luck with that energy disruption?" Dr. Mendez's voice came through the comms, sounding strained but determined. "I've almost got it. I've been analyzing the Empyrean systems, and I think I've found the source of its power. But it's heavily shielded. I need more time." Hargrove's eyes narrowed. Time was the one thing they didn't have. The Empyrean was closing in, and the Horizon's remaining shields were rapidly draining. If they didn't do something soon, they would be destroyed. Then, as if the warship sensed their desperation, the comms crackled to life once again. This time, the voice on the other end was different. It wasn't cold or mechanical. It was human, strong, confident, and unmistakably familiar. "This is Captain Eleanor Hayes of the Empyrean," the voice said, calm yet commanding. "I am the leader of the last human defense fleet, created long ago to protect humanity from the threats beyond our galaxy. You're witnessing the power of the human race's final weapon. We are not your enemy, but we are prepared for whatever it takes to fulfill our mission." The crew of the Horizon stood frozen, the weight of the words sinking in. Last human defense fleet. Hargrove's mind raced. "Captain Hayes, what are you talking about? What is this ship? Why has it remained hidden all these years?" The response came without hesitation. "You've been kept in the dark for too long. The Empyrean was created in secret, built by the early human factions to defend Earth from an alien threat that still looms out there. We were stationed far from the core systems, hidden away, waiting for a time when the galaxy was unprepared. That time is now." Captain Hargrove's stomach churned. "So you're telling me that this ship is humanity's last line of defense?" "Yes," Captain Hayes replied. "We have been programmed to protect Earth and its colonies at all costs. And now we've come to ensure that you are ready to face the challenges ahead. The enemy is closing in, distant but inevitable. We cannot allow humanity to be unprepared." "But why didn't we know about this? Why keep us in the dark?" Hargrove demanded. Captain Hayes' tone grew more resolute. "The project was secret, even from most of humanity. It was meant to be a safeguard, a weapon to be unleashed only in the most dire of circumstances. And those circumstances have arrived." Hargrove's mind spun with the new information. This was bigger than a simple fight for survival. The Empyrean wasn't just a warship. It was a key to something much more profound. A secret, hidden part of humanity's history. And now, its future. "Are you saying the galaxy is under threat?" Hargrove asked, his voice heavy with disbelief. "From who?" "We don't know yet," Captain Hayes replied, her voice firm. "But we know they're coming. The same threat that forced us to hide all these years. It will be impossible to fight alone. But together, we might stand a chance. That is why I'm reaching out to you. You have the ability to rally the remaining human forces. The Horizon is a symbol, Captain. And with you, we can prepare the galaxy for what's coming." The words were like a weight pressing down on Hargrove's chest. His mind was racing. And yet, deep down, he knew there was no going back. The Empyrean had been watching, waiting, and now it was offering humanity a chance to prepare for something far greater than they could ever imagine. But could they trust it? Could they trust Captain Hayes? Before he could respond, the communications cut out again, and the station's warning alarms blared. The Empyrean wasn't finished. It was powering up for another attack, its weaponry glowing brighter than ever. "They're preparing to fire again," Lieutenant Harris shouted, panic rising in her voice. Captain Hargrove's mind worked quickly. There was no time to waste. They had been given the chance to form an alliance with the Empyrean, but first, they had to survive this battle. The warship's firepower was immense, and it was clear that the Horizon's only chance was to disrupt its core. Dr. Mendez, can you get that disruption system online now? Hargrove demanded. I'm trying. Dr. Mendez's voice came, filled with urgency. I need a few more seconds. Hargrove took a deep breath. This was it. The final decision. Could they trust the Empyrean? Was this humanity's last hope, or a weapon they didn't fully understand? The Horizon shook again as the Empyrean fired, and Hargrove realized that the only thing they could do now was put their trust in the ship, in Captain Hayes, and in humanity's future. Do it, Dr. Mendez, Hargrove ordered. Whatever it takes, do it now. The fate of humanity's survival was in their hands. Would they be able to stop the Empyrean, or would this mysterious force be the very thing that ensured humanity's future? The battle was far from over. The final decision. The Horizon trembled violently as the Empyrean unleashed another catastrophic energy blast. The station's shields flickered, their protection nearly gone. The crew held their breath as the sound of metal groaning and alarms filled the air, signaling the imminent collapse of their defenses. It was only a matter of time before the Empyrean's firepower overwhelmed them. Shields down to 5%, Captain. Lieutenant Harris called out, her voice full of dread. Hargrove's heart pounded in his chest. They had come so far, but now it seemed like all their efforts were about to be for nothing. The Empyrean was relentless, its energy weapons tearing into their station like a relentless predator. If they didn't act fast, the Horizon would be nothing but debris. Dr. Mendez, do we have that system online yet? Hargrove's voice was urgent, trying to keep his calm amid the chaos. I'm activating it now. Dr. Mendez replied, her voice strained. The core disruption should trigger in 3, 2, 1. A blinding flash of light erupted from the Horizon as the new system came to life. For a split second, everything seemed to freeze. Then the Empyrean faltered, its massive form shuddering in space. Its shields flickered violently, and the immense energy signature it had been projecting dimmed considerably. We've done it, Dr. Mendez cried out. The energy conversion system is offline. Their shields are weakening. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief, but Captain Hargrove knew better than to think the battle was over. The Empyrean had taken so much damage, but it was still formidable. Still, this was their moment, their only chance to finish this once and for all. Lieutenant Harris, target that weak spot we identified earlier. All firepower on my mark. Aye, Captain, Harris responded, her hands working quickly to lock onto the damaged section of the Empyrean. The bridge grew silent as the crew braced for the final decisive shot. Captain Hargrove's fingers clenched the armrests of his chair as he prepared to give the order. The seconds felt like hours. Now, Lieutenant, Hargrove commanded. The Horizon fired its full array of weapons, the beams of energy lancing through the cold void of space and hitting the Empyrean's damaged core with pinpoint accuracy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening crack, the Empyrean's outer hull began to fracture. Sparks and energy flared from within, and the massive warship groaned under the strain. It's working. We're getting through, Harris shouted, her voice trembling with excitement. But just as they thought victory was within reach, the Empyrean retaliated, firing one last desperate shot at the Horizon. The beam of energy ripped through the space between them, slamming into the already weakened station with a tremendous force. The Horizon shuddered violently, systems failing one by one. The station's control panels flickered, and the lights dimmed to almost nothing. Brace for impact, Hargrove shouted, as the station's final defenses gave way. The Horizon's crew were thrown from their seats as the entire structure rattled with the force of the blast. But through the chaos, a strange calm came over Hargrove. His mind cleared as he realized that they had done it. They had stopped the Empyrean. The battle was over. The Empyrean's form flickered once more, the once mighty warship now reduced to a crippled, glowing wreck in space. Its massive engines sputtered, then went dark. The silence in space was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the horizon's systems slowly coming back online. Hargrove stood, taking in the scene before him. The battle had been fierce, but they had survived. The Empyrean was no longer a threat. "Status report," Hargrove said, his voice steady. "We've sustained heavy damage, Captain," Lieutenant Harris said, her voice exhausted. "But we're alive. The Empyrean is disabled. It's no longer a danger to us." Dr. Mendez added, "I'm running diagnostics, but we're in critical condition. We need repairs. Fast." Hargrove nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The battle had been won, but the questions remained. Why had the Empyrean come to them? Why had it hidden for so long? And what was the true threat that had caused it to appear now? As the crew began their efforts to stabilize the horizon, Captain Hargrove made a decision. They had to know the truth. The Empyrean was humanity's final defense. If that defense had failed, then what was out there? What kind of enemy could have driven humanity to create such a weapon? "Lieutenant Harris, open a channel to the Empyrean. I want to speak with Captain Hayes." "Aye, Captain," Harris replied, her fingers dancing over the console. A few moments later, the communication line crackled, and Captain Hayes's voice came through, sounding more weary than before. "Captain Hargrove," she said, her tone resigned, "you've done it. You've stopped us. But now, the real fight begins. The enemy that we've been waiting for is coming. We need to prepare, and we need your help. It's not over yet." Hargrove stared out at the wreckage of the Empyrean, the weight of the future pressing down on him. They had fought to survive, but now they had to fight to prepare for something much bigger than they could have ever imagined. Humanity's future depended on it. "This isn't over," Hargrove said, determination in his voice. "We'll be ready. We'll do whatever it takes." The real war was about to begin. And this time, humanity wouldn't be caught off guard.